week in the chamber, it's a wild card week. No real theme, we're just talking about what we're interested in at the moment. A silly period in American history, a game where you fight all the monsters, some new material from our favorite wizards of the coast, and we catch up with some superhero media. All this and more on Fandom Roulette. Alright, hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Doing well. So how have you been, Cody?
Been pretty good. How about yourself?
Been alright. What's some nerdy stuff you've been up to as of late?
Nerdy stuff. I just finished watching Season 2 of The Travelers and mostly Persona 5.
More Persona 5.
Yeah, this game's going to take forever.
Are you the Persona 5? Is that the twist?
I think that is the M. Night Shyamalan twist, as I am, in fact, the Persona, and the fifth incarnation of.
That's intense, man. And then Travelers Season 2. What's that about?
I think we will discuss a little bit more of it later, but
okay, that works.
But it's a good show.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Joe, what nerdy stuff have you been up to?
I finished Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I saw that on Facebook. Please tell me how it was.
It's very timely. I'm finishing it almost 2 decades after it was done airing. Yeah, it was. It's really good. It's been making me think a lot about like episodic television in a major way.
Okay. Just
because it's like, I don't know. It's been a really long time since I've watched a truly episodic television show. I'm used to things that are like, long-term storytelling where every episode ends with a twist and that hook to get you to watch the next week. And, it was kind of interesting seeing like little 40-minute stories that got wrapped up in a nice bow. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not super successfully, but it was always interesting to watch. And now I'm moving on to Deep Space Nine, which was another Star Trek program that kind of sort of aired concurrently, but it never interacted with each other because once again, episodic television.
Right.
But yeah, so that was my big thing. I saw today on my like Facebook review that on this day last year I was watching the original series, and then within the year I had finished basically all of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So,
damn,
I spent a lot of my last year watching Star Trek. It was intense. But yeah, so this week's kind of a special thing. We're doing some retooling of the podcast, like nothing major, guys. Don't worry.
Changing the whole thing.
Changing the whole thing. We're not going to be a cooking podcast.
Oh yes, that's what I've always wanted.
Well, that's good podcasting. Is a cooking podcast because we talk about how good the food looks, and then it's just like audio of us going, which I know people just love. But yeah, nothing major. We're just kind of changing up how some of our sections work, specifically the history section, which should be fun because it's going to be more of like kind of just asking a broad question and rolling with it, as opposed to like giving you a shallow dive of an entire culture or period of time, because that's a lot, and I think it would be more interesting to just kind of focus on individual things. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But that being said, I'm going to do a shallow dive into a certain period. So I was, looking over some of my old stuff that I had read and written over grad school, looking for a specific paper that I haven't been able to find yet. I was reminded that during grad school I had a brief little obsession with the Prohibition era. And I would argue it's one of America's sillier periods of history.
Sure.
For a lot of reasons. Temperance and America have always kind of gone hand in hand, ironically enough. Right around the end of the Civil War, temperance started getting this big push. Alcohol was destroying families.
No.
It was, Cody. There was like a very influential book called 10 Nights in a Bar Room, which is about this like person who like was like basically an undercover investigator who was reading about like all of these men who would come and they would spend all their paychecks and they wouldn't be home with their families and this and that. And eventually Congress passed an amendment to the Constitution, which if you remember your civics is a pretty hard thing to do. You have to get a majority of both houses and like 2/3 of the United States to vote for it, outlawing the making and selling of alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah, which was like a big deal for a couple of reasons. And so initially there was like kind of like quote unquote soft prohibition, which was like you couldn't purchase alcohol in bars. But They came up with a really clever. I think you're going to enjoy this, Cody. I think you're going to enjoy this. This is fun.
Yeah.
Little thing, which was there was no laws against giving alcohol away as a gift.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay.
you would come into a bar, and you would sit down, and you would order like crackers, and they would charge you for the crackers. And what's that? Why, the restaurant is gifting you whiskey.
Oh man,
What a nice gift, right?
that is a super nice gift.
It was like $3 crackers, and then you got a free shot of whiskey because of it.
Nice.
Other things too, like this is my personal favorite one. There were vineyards, throughout America at that point,
Okay.
and they would sell bottles of grape juice that would have a logo on it, or like a label on it that said, "Warning: if you let this sit out for 3+ weeks, it will become wine, and you can't drink it." And so they would be selling like legal grape juice that would ferment over the next couple of weeks, and that would pretty quickly become alcohol. So these were some initial things that were happening. Innocent enough rule violation, and then over time people started cracking down on it. So you started closing down bars. There's now those rather infamous pictures of like federal officers taking like axes and chopping into whiskey barrels.
No.
And this actually had a really nationally devastating effect for a lot of reasons. Like before Prohibition, Cleveland had like some of the largest numbers of like beer brewers in like the country, and then they go out of they're forced to go out of business, and Cleveland's brewery scene never truly recovered until about a decade ago, when you started having all these microbreweries starting to pop up. And this was true throughout the country. You had lots of small individual distilleries and breweries and things like that kind of falling apart because of this national law. But Cody, do you think that Prohibition was successful?
Hell no.
No, not at all. How smart of you, Cody.
Oh.
You get the gold star this podcast.
Ooh, I got a gold star.
Look at that. Put that on your. So yeah, needless to say, Prohibition was pretty immediately not effective, and like Prohibition in basically all time periods of whatever. So like we're currently going through like drug prohibition, which isn't really working.
Not really.
People find ways to get what they want. And so during this time period, there were sort of two major ways that people were doing it. The first was this group of people called rum runners.
Ooh.
And so this was pretty like, it happened mainly along coasts. Cleveland actually had a fairly successful rum running ring going out of, not necessarily Cleveland, but out of, eastbound and westbound suburbs.
Sure.
And so, depending on where you lived, you were in close proximity to either Canada or Mexico, both of which did not have laws prohibiting alcohol. And so, you had people who would go in and buy, alcohol and ship it back, hiding it in paint cans or in construction materials, things like that, and then selling it for a very, very high profit in the States. And I saw from one of my statistics in this paper an estimated like 2 million, and keep in mind this is 2 million in like the 1920s, which is an absurd amount of money. It's still a pretty big amount of money today, but not quite as, absurd, I suppose. Dollars were paid to federal agents to basically get them to not pay attention or to look the other way when people were illegally shipping rum over.
Damn.
So, yeah, it wasn't a fantastic system. The more you think about it, like, these systems, there's evidence to suggest that they kind of stretched through the country, which I guess makes sense considering that, like, if you didn't live along the coast, it's not like you weren't getting your alcohol. So, we had people driving stock cars, which they souped up to avoid authorities, which, according to some people, and I've not actually done any of my own analysis on this, a lot of people claim that that's where NASCAR was invented. Was you had these people, souping up their cars to try to avoid the authorities and then arguing with each other, well, my car's better than your car, and then they would start racing each other. And you could get alcohol pretty much anywhere throughout the country just based on the fact that there are these people who are sailing over to Canada, grabbing big old boxes and crates worth of, whiskey, what have you, and then bringing it back to the States. And then the other side of that is a kind of sort of influx of organized crime. which isn't great, but it happened. Specifically, the Mafia, which was, the Italian sort of organized crime syndicate, who opened up, especially in Chicago, these things called speakeasies.
I know that word.
Yeah, they were secret underground bars, and they've kind of been parodied and lampooned a little bit over time. You would come up, you'd say your secret word, and you'd come downstairs and you'd find a bar that was fairly prosperous. There's also strong evidence to suggest, although this is debated by some people, that the Prohibition era is when we started getting the concept of cocktails.
Interesting. Why is that?
Well, so there's a couple of reasons for it, which is I say that people were, running, across the border to bring in, quality alcohol.
Okay.
And that's true because it was expensive.
Right.
And so people started doing stuff where they, certain alcohols are easier to distill than others.
Sure.
So, you'd have people making alcohol in, bathtubs. That was like
moonshine.
Yeah, you'd have moonshine. You'd have liquors that were incredibly potent and not incredibly tasty.
Okay.
And so what do? You try to hide that taste, right?
Right.
So you would start mixing it with other things to try to hide the fact that you were drinking stuff that was incredibly strong or, incredibly harsh on your palate. So yeah, there you go. That's a little intro to cocktails.
Nice.
Probably invented during this time period. And then there are some bars down in New Orleans that claim that they invented the first cocktails. I know that because I lived down there for a while, but people debate that as well because, everyone debates everything. Which is good. We need to debate things like that. Here's one fun thing about speakeasies.
Okay.
They got really creative on how to hide them and how to, evade them. So I'm going to bring in an example of a little bar in Cleveland. Not quite Cleveland. It was right at the border of two counties, so Cuyahoga County and Lorain County to our more local listeners. Jurisdiction is a funny thing. Sometimes you can't cross county lines without authority or reason. And so one of the things people would do is they would park in Lorain County. They would come over to Cuyahoga County and they would drink, and if they heard that the fuzz was coming, there was a tunnel that would take you across county lines. So if you heard the authorities were coming, you would run, come up, and then they couldn't actually arrest you.
Huh.
A lot of speakeasies had tunnels like this that allowed for people to make quick exits without getting taken by the authorities. And this was just sort of like a lengthy period of time. And it's also thought of as a rather violent time because it was. Because if you have lots and lots of people all trying to corner the same market, they're probably not going to end it in the most amicable of ways. So this idea of it, Tommy guns came from this time period, guys in pinstripe suits. Obviously Al Capone is like one of the biggest names of Prohibition in the 20s. He made most of his money by selling illegal liquor and running illegal gambling halls, but that's another story.
Neat.
It was just, it must have been a rather intense time, I feel, just because you weren't quite sure what was happening. And I think it was really emblematic of the rest of the things that were going on during this time period. So this was happening primarily in the 1920s, and it was a time of immense changes in America. You started seeing demographics changes, like the likes of which America hadn't seen in a while. You had a lot of new immigrants coming in. You had people trying to adapt and create more modern lifestyles. We had just finished the World War, and the 20s were prosperous and they were elaborate, and they were not going to stop anytime soon until the 1930s, where everything came crashing down. As did a lot of these speakeasies, because alcohol was made illegal again. But yeah. Any questions?
So you said that about $2 million were spent basically bribing people to look away when they moved booze.
Yep.
That alone is a lot of money. Think about how much money they I guess the question is there a rough estimate to how much dough that was out of their pocket? Was it a huge dent in most people, or was it just going up to a guy giving him $10 nowadays and be like, yeah, pretend you didn't see this?
Yeah, it was probably so there's sort of two caveats to that number, I would say.
Okay.
The first of which is I found it in some pro-prohibition pamphlets.
Okay.
And it was talking about ways that we can make prohibition more effective. And so, things like that are always going to use extreme numbers to make it look like, the problem is a lot bigger than it maybe actually was. But, it was probably more smaller bribes throughout the
Okay.
country because New York alone had so many points of entry and exit during Prohibition. Like you had you had Florida and New Orleans, which were big sections. You had Detroit was a very big stop for a lot of rum runners because it was literally just across the river from Canada. So yeah, it was kind of happening throughout, and a lot of times too. Like, do you know about the Untouchables?
I mean, I watched that movie that came out a while back.
Yeah, the reason they were called Untouchables was it was a group of cops that weren't able to be bribed by like Capone or like the other organized crime units in like Chicago specifically because police weren't paid a lot, and
Okay.
so they started trying to get a little bit more money, and so it was one of the ways was just kind of looking the other way, which is a sad case, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it was a pretty intense time. When I was a young lad,
Ooh.
my father and I were in Chicago, and we took a tour of different places in Chicago that like were or important during Prohibition in the 1920s and things like that. And almost all of them involved people getting gunned down, and I think obviously the most famous version of that is the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Oof.
Have you heard about that?
I mean, back in school, which was forever ago, you're gonna have to remind me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super on all of the details. I know it was two units. I believe it was Capone, and I think his biggest rival was Bugsy Siegel. Great nicknames out of this time period, by the way. There was going to be a basically a quote unquote truce, and they met in this abandoned parking garage or whatever, and they just gunned each other down, and it was intense. You hear about things like territories and things like that. They took that stuff very seriously. It's not any kind of time period I personally would want to live in. So I think over time, like a lot of things, we've come to kind of romanticize it. But from reading about it, it sounded like it was just a very tense, unsure period in American history that was started for kind of a silly reason, which was to try and stop people. It was designed to stop people's vices,
Right,
and
right.
what it did was just kind of create a whole new subculture of vice. Um, so yeah, there you go. That was Prohibition. Fun, right?
Yeah, when you say it like that.
Any other questions?
I mean, you did a pretty good job at explaining the hows and whys, so I think I'm good.
Yeah. And
If
then
the audience has any questions, feel free to give us an email, though. We'd be glad to answer them.
yeah, and emails, which we'll talk about in probably after the next section.
For sure.
So yeah, do you want to move on to Vero games?
Video games? Yeah.
Vero games.
So the reason I'm super excited, or the reason, one of the reasons why we're doing a wild card instead of a thematic one is because I had a very specific topic in mind for video games, because this game's coming out in, let's see, doing some math, a day and some change.
Whoa, that's soon.
Yeah, it's super soon. When this comes out, it'll probably be hours away from coming out.
Whoa, that's crazy.
So I'm super excited about it. And that game is Monster Hunter World.
Whoa, what?
Yeah.
A whole world of monster hunters.
Yeah.
That's a lot of world.
Yeah, that is a lot of world. So
Is that the tagline? That's a lot of world.
I don't think there's a tagline necessarily, but this game is super. At least my memories of it. Granted, I haven't picked up on like I played the beta of this one and it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
But for those of you who are not monster hunters yourselves, this is I guess you would call this an action role-playing game where you take on the task of being hunters for humanity as larger-than-life monsters basically reign supreme. So basically the way this works, like mechanically, is every monster is almost like its own unique boss fight.
Oh.
And you have all these quests to go out and gather things for... And this is a very crafting-heavy game. Everything that you make in the game, or everything that you acquire in the game, is either a crafting regent or something you made through crafting. Kind of gives you like that old pre-industrial vibe going on where like everyone had to like make shit instead of just like kind of getting it automated.
Oh yeah.
So
what a time to be alive.
Right. This game does a really good job at kind of giving you perspective in this world. So like you are tiny, almost minuscule compared to the monsters that you have to go out and fight. So combat is very brutal. A lot of the weapons are either really strong and really slow, so you've got lots of like kind of, you got to take these big swings, but these monsters are pretty agile for the most part, with some exceptions, but for the most part you have to time your strikes pretty well to avoid taking damage. So you've got these big weapons that do a lot of damage, and then you've got like small weapons or ranged weapons that kind of have their own unique advantages and disadvantages.
Okay.
And in total, there are 14 different weapon types, which kind of changes the way you play the game. So for instance, if you have a big giant sword, you like Cloud Strife, boom, giant sword. That weapon is super powerful. It does a lot of damage, but it's super slow. All your swings are very slow, so every strike has to be very meticulously planned. And then you've got your smaller weapons, like there's like kind of 2 dual swords, which are kind of like, realistically they're about the size of the person, but they're the smallest weapon in the game. And you like go around and you do these quick, almost menacing strikes, and like you have to build up a power meter, which is very different from the way you play the large sword. And then you've got like almost 4 different ranged weapons. You've got, your light crossbow, which is good for maneuvering around and kind of taking pot shots at the creature, doing small bits of damage. But what's neat about those weapons is you can switch out the ammo and kind of craft and create your own separate, ammo types. So you've got like sleep bullets. So like if you shoot enough sleep bullets into the monster, it'll like fall asleep.
Interesting.
So there's like, like I said, there's 14 different weapon combinations. So there's usually, I should say there is always a playstyle for a person playing. Me personally, I really dig the long sword, which is kind of the in-between of like the smaller sword and the big sword. So like it does some pretty good damage, but its strikes are a lot quicker than the big sword. And it's got this kind of cool mode where the more you strike the monster, you kind of fill up this bar, and then you can kind of unleash it for like a super attack. I might be misremembering the exact specifics, but that's the kind of stuff you'll get out of Monster Hunter's combat. And it's really cool because there are these huge zones, and kind of the advantage of Monster Hunter World being kind of on newer tech is that all the levels are pretty seamless. Like you have these big, larger than life zones, and the way it used to work is you'd have numbered zones like 1 through 14, and every time you would run between zones, there'd be a loading screen, which is kind of terrifying because of the way the monsters work.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because so sometimes there's like, old strats for my player, or for when I was playing, is that if a monster left your zone and was going to the one right next to it, you wait a couple seconds so that it would move away from the entrance, because if you ran in right behind it, you would load in and you would spawn as he's literally tail whipping you back into the other zone, which could do a significant chunk of damage.
That does sound like fun.
Right, but with this new tech that they're on, they're seamless zones. You don't have to worry, like the only loading screens you have are when you enter the zone for the first time. One of the things they added in this game that I don't think was in the other ones, but don't quote me on that, is this slingshot. I think it's called the Slinger, and it allows you to not only sling certain like if you pick up a stone, you can sling it at someone to try to get its attention, but you can also use it as kind of like a grappling hook. And there's some really cool scenes. I didn't get to do it during my time in the beta, but you can like find smaller, like almost, human-sized wyverns and like shoot your slinger into them and kind of use them to grapple and glide around the zone.
Now that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm into that.
And then they also added so like the way this game works is you don't level up traditionally. Like it's not like you killed the monster, here's 20 experience, you're level 2. What happens is you collect materials by killing the monsters and carving their carving their corpses. This is going to sound a little grim dark here, but you'll collect scales from Monster 1, and then you'll use those scales and other things that you've collected to make a suit of armor based off of them. What happens is you'll get their aspects. So, like, if it's like a fire-breathing dragon and you carve it, you'll get fire-breathing, like, or fire resistance, or maybe you do more damage with fire weapons and stuff like that. So the whole idea is you'll do these boss battles, you'll collect basically the pieces, parts to build certain weapons and armor, and then you'll go on to fight the next big guy, and he's harder than the last guy, and you kind of keep, that's kind of the gameplay loop, is you'll kill a boss, you'll figure it out, and then sometimes you either grind that guy a couple times in order to get the pieces you need, or you move on to, like, the next big monster, and it's this really, like, rewarding, like, once you figure out how to, like, really take down a creature, especially if it's been giving you a hard time, it's really satisfying to go back and just, like, kick its ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the last thing, I mean, besides the fact that it's, and this is, like, my favorite part, is the fact that it's co-op. You can play with up to 4 other hunters at a given time. And it's really cool. When I first started playing, I didn't have a whole lot of friends that were playing it, so I'd have to, like, go online and, like, search for people. And it was always really cool because there was almost this weird, and I say it's weird because it was different from what I had experienced before with online games. It's like, there's this, like, really, like, helpful community that ends up happening, because if you're going to go far Monster Hunter World, like, you need to go online and play with your friends and kind of learn how to play the game, or learn the more expert things that you can do. But there's also this kind of, like, helping each other out. So, like, I know when I first started playing Monster Hunter, it was on the PlayStation 2, so this kind of takes me back. But we would do, like, we'd be like, okay, we'll do player A's mission where we gotta hunt this particular dragon. And then player B is going to put up a quest where we kill this other dragon that he's working on. He's having a hard time with it. Or, and then player C is going to do this quest because he's still trying to make that longsword that he wants to make. And there's this kind of, like, it's almost incredible because, like, there wasn't voice chat back then, at least as far as I was aware. So, you'd have, like, a keyboard that you would, like, plug into your PlayStation 2 and, like, tap out, like, hey buds, let's go hunt this guy. And it was so weird. I had never experienced that before. Granted, I was probably, like, 15, so, like, most of my time was, like, Call of Duty and Halo, which was mostly just kids telling me how they slept with my mom, or, what have you.
Noob Lord.
But, yeah, right? They tell me how unskilled I was at the game. So, yeah. I mean, that's more or less Monster Hunter World. It comes out Friday. Do you got any questions about the game, or did I glaze over a certain topic that...
So, first off, I didn't know that the PlayStation 2 could even support, like, a keyboard. That's insanity to me. But it sounds really neat. So, now maybe I'm completely off base, but how does this compare to, like, Shadow of the Colossus? Like, it sounds like the monsters are a lot faster.
Yeah, so they're not quite as big as the monsters in Shadow of the Colossus. I would say they're about the size of, like they range from being the size of, like, a couple vans stacked together to, like, semi trucks to, okay. And then some of them get pretty big, like, sizes of buildings and shit like that. But for the most part, they're way more agile, and the way Shadow of the Colossus, for those of you who have played it, there's, like, certain weak points that you have to hit in order to basically take down the Colossus. That's not necessarily the case in Monster Hunter. So certain areas will be weak to certain, damage types. So, like, if you're using a sword, you're doing slashing damage, and typically tails are really weak to slashing attacks, and you can actually cut off, like, the tail of certain monsters while you're fighting them, and then they, like, come off and you can loot them for, like, a part of the tail. And if you have a very resilient monster, he might be only weak to hammer right away. I know one of the early monsters is, like, he likes to hide in the mud, and he'll basically, like, jump out at you. Baroth, he was, like, the bane of my existence when I first started really getting into modern day Monster Hunter, like, on the Wii. And he was really resilient to all damage types until someone with a hammer would knock off the mud. So there's a lot of like interesting things that each monster does. Like some of them fly, some of them don't. Some of them travel underground. Some of them are sea creatures and often will try to stay near water. But yeah, they're typically just faster and they hit at least in the beta, the easier monsters, like the monsters that they start you off with, don't hit you quite as hard. Or maybe we just had like really strong armor or something, but they didn't hit as hard as I remember. But then as you progress through the game, like you'll get to certain tiers of monsters, and then they start hitting you like oh, if I get hit once, half of my health is gone. Like, uh-oh.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
And then, like, are there, like, do you always get the same loot per body, or is it, like, there's, like, more lucrative loot?
There's loot tables, basically. So, like, there's a percentage chance, and this might be the one thing that I'm, like, not super into about Monster Hunter World. Or Monster Hunter in general, is there's loot tables. So you'll be playing, and if you if you cut off the tail, there's a certain chance that the tail will drop from carving the tail, or a scale, and certain items are rarer than others, and typically those rare items are needed to complete the set. So oftentimes what happens is, knowing my luck, I'll need one piece for, like, my whole set of armor, but I can only get it if we break the head and something drops off of the head, and that's like a 10% chance to drop.
Ugh, that's the worst.
Also, and granted, I don't know if this is actually legitimate or this is just kind of everybody online, is that there's kind of like this desire meter where, like, if you look at a particular armor and you're like, oh yeah, that's badass, I'm going to go kill that creature. Well, because the game saw that you were looking through the items and stuff, that it's actually even harder to get the items that you need for it. Now, I can't confirm that, but it definitely feels true with how many hours I've put into Monster Hunter.
Fun.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we go on to the next little section?
Yeah, we probably should start that middle bit.
Middle bit. So anyway,
I think they've been different every time.
They have been. That's my promise.
No.
It's always going to be different, because honestly, I don't remember enough between recording sessions. I'm like a goldfish. As soon as this thing turns off, I'm like, what did I even say?
Oh my god.
Middle bit. So yeah, middle bit. Welcome to the middle bit.
Right.
You should probably follow us on Twitter at Fandom Art Podcast, I think. Was that right?
Close.
Yes.
For anyone wanting to follow us on Twitter, it's FandomR_podcast.
I was so close.
You were so close. You just forgot the underscore.
Yeah, and then if you want to email us, we're at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
Perfecto.
See? I remembered about half of it. Yeah, so as always, we always are excited for you guys to join in on the conversation. We like to hear your opinions and all that stuff. And it's more fun to know that there are, like, people out there actually listening to this, so.
Right. And also, for future reference, we're thinking about running a slightly varied history section where we ask fun, silly questions to answer about history's goofiest topics.
Yeah, like what's up with that garlic thing?
Yeah, what's up with that garlic thing? So if you have any fun history questions that you would like to ask Joe, and maybe I can help a little too.
Yeah, for sure.
Feel free to email us or throw it on our Twitter. We would be appreciative of that.
Maybe we can even do a couple, depending on how long it takes.
Yeah,
we're here to answer. Or if you've ever heard something that's like crazy and doesn't pass your like sniff test, let us know that too, and I can look into it.
If you want to get to the source, if you want to follow, if you want to watch this, we're on iTunes, so feel free to give us ratings and share us with your friends. We are also on SoundCloud with Fandom Roulette is the name. If you're ever looking for something easy, like if you've got, old man Jenkins who doesn't, what's a SoundCloud? You can give them the link to our website, www.fandomroulette.com. It has all of our episodes updated with all of the same stuff that you'd get on SoundCloud. in an easy-to-get area.
Nice.
We're also working on a Facebook page.
Yes, we are.
Nice.
It's
and
coming.
then we're working on the logistics of YouTube, but that's still not concrete yet. So,
we're working on
with
it.
all that said, now you can exit us out of...
So anyway, oh man, what's that sound in the distance? It's a garbage boy. Oh no, it's another theme song. It's a garbage boy. Who's that? It's a garbage boy. Garbage boy.
I almost just fell out of my seat laughing.
So anyway, welcome to Garbage Boys.
Right, it's a show within a show, Inception, if you will, where I take Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Everything?
Everything.
Whoa.
And I create characters, whether you're doing, maybe you're a dungeon master like myself, who gets tired of creating characters that the players always murder, and you're looking for some inspiration. Nobody I'd know. Or if you're a player looking to do something silly and fun, and, and this also applies to, like, maybe you're writing a story and you want some silly character, and I go online to find the best names, 2018, to give these people, and then roll their lives, and then I tell you them here.
All right, so what's our name?
So this week we've got... we have Edge Gold Noble. I found the best site. It's so good.
Is his name like his first name Edge and his last name Gold Noble?
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm just imagining he's like a 15-year-old who's like rejecting his parents. And he's like, I reject you, Mom. My name is Edge now.
That's basically the name generator I found.
That's so good.
So he's a dragonborn sorcerer.
Okay.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar, dragonborn are like half people, or half human, half dragon. And sorcerers are just spellcasters. So, to give you a little bit of background of Edge Gold Noble, Edge knew his parents and was born at home.
Good.
Edge had no Edge had no siblings and grew up with his single mother while his father was imprisoned for kidnapping. The Gold Noble family lived a modest lifestyle but moved around a lot.
That's ironic considering what the last name is.
Despite that, Edge had several friends and his childhood was generally a happy one.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. He became a politician in his early years.
Okay. Good start.
After he escaped from a magical conflagration... I can't say this word. Conflagration, which is basically something blew up. Unharmed and unchanged, he began to exhibit unusual abilities. That was just the beginning of his adventuring career. That's when he found out he was a sorcerer.
Oh, that makes sense. Did he blow it up on accident?
Only time will tell.
Oh. I like that mysterious hook.
Right? Edge Gold Noble is 46 and had 3 life-defining moments before today.
46?
Yeah, he's a little older. He's on the older side.
That's cool. You don't see a lot of them.
It's true. Most adventurers are pretty young. So
although
it's nice.
Oh, sorry.
Well, Dragonborn, at least in 5th edition, live a pretty standard human cycle. So, like, they live to about, 80.
Oh, okay.
Edge met a friendly alchemist that gifted him friendship and a mysterious potion. After, Edge did something during his travels that brought terrible shame to himself in the eyes of his mother. Edge would eventually find true love on the battlefield and got married.
Oh, that's nice.
For those of you who understood that Metal Gear Solid reference, even love can bloom on the battlefield. So that's Edge Gold Noble. That is my garbage can man of a character.
Hey, can he pop up in our D&D campaign?
I actually have already used Trinity Slaughter, so yes, Edge Gold Noble will definitely make an appearance.
God, that's so good. Edge Gold Noble.
I couldn't find a better name.
Oh my god, I just imagine him on a Trapper Keeper. So
dude, he's one of my Sonic creations. He's part of the
Garbage Boy. So yeah.
So this is part of the RPG section where we talk about role-playing games, because that's what we do pretty much every weekend or so.
We make an honest attempt to.
Well, we should be doing it this weekend.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So Wizards of the Coast...
Those silly guys.
Those silly guys at Wizards of the Coast created 3 new subclasses for their Unearthed Arcana material, which is basically kind of public playtesting that usually in some form or another gets put into a material book, such as Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Everything?
Everything.
I'm going to make that joke every time. So.
Oh, God. Kill me.
Until I forget.
Right. Which should be right after this episode.
That's probable, actually.
That checks.
But yeah. So
yeah, they made 3 new subclasses. So those of you who are in D&D 5th edition, every class gets their own kind of specialty that kind of molds and shapes them into what they'll kind of be doing for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah.
For the most part.
And it's always... oh, sorry. Well, I mean, it's always interesting to me, too, like, just how, like, unique they all feel, which I think is really cool. Because it's like, the clerics, it's different, kinds of like pantheons of gods always represented different things, and like barbarians, you have your Conan the style barbarians,
right,
and then you also have your just like crazy berserker, like I just want to kill everything that moves style barbarians, and etc. Right. But anyway, going on.
Yeah, so there's 3. So the druids got a new circle.
Ooh.
And it's the Circle of Spores.
Ooh.
So this one, without just basically reading everything, they are basically your kind of death option. Druids of the Circle of Spores find beauty in decay. They see within mold and other fungi the ability to transform lifeless material into abundant, albeit somewhat strange life.
Mm.
So they're kind of this weird... They're still technically a druid. Like, they believe in the cycle of life and all things, but they also kind of tend to lean on the death and decay and things like that. So the kind of ladder of the cycle. However, it is specified within this that they still don't like undead, despite kind of being very undead themed. And so mechanically what this means is they get a lot of cool spells that would normally be served for like a necromancer.
Okay.
They get stuff like Ray of Enfeeblement, which basically turns somebody into like someone who's really terrible at their job. You've got Animate Dead. Contagion is one of their spells, which thematically fits. And then their big one is basically, instead of shape changing, they can wild shape into basically making that, like, those spores and like that fungus like surround them and give them basically temporary hit points, doing a bunch of damage with their key spell, which is called Halo of Spores, which basically does 3 poison damage to a creature that you see within 10 feet as a reaction, which is super strong. Basically throughout the turn, they basically just deal flat 3 poison damage. There's not like a dice roll or anything.
I'm making so many unpleasant faces right now.
And then it gets pretty crazy later. 6th level, they get the ability to basically animate dead as just kind of like a token ability for them. And then spreading spores, they basically can throw their halo of spores at somebody instead of being like right next to them. So yeah, it's a pretty cool theme. I don't know if I won't get a time to play it, but I think it's a very cool one. I think it's something that the druids don't have. So like it's nice to see a class or like a subclass that is something truly different from what they've done before.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fighters get a new martial archetype, which is how fighters kind of change themselves. And they basically it's called Brute, but in my opinion, it's Champion Plus.
Okay.
So for those of you who listened to our RPG, or our first RPG one, or maybe it was Character Creation, the Champion Fighter is basically a fighter who gets a lot of cool passive buffs, and not necessarily things that like make your play style complicated. So champions basically get to crit on a 19 and a 20 instead of just a 20.
Oh, man.
And they get a lot of like cool passive stuff. And that's kind of the brute. Basically, every time you attack with the brute, you get an additional D4 added on to the damage die. So like if you do a D6, you can also add a D4, which makes you do more damage. Their 7th level ability allows them to add an additional D6 to their saving throw, so they're they're better at not dying or taking negative effects. And then 15th, they get devastating critical, which, as I'm reading it, you score a critical hit, you gain a bonus to the weapon's damage roll equal to your level in this class. So at 15th level, every time you crit, you can add an additional 15 points of damage.
God, that's so rude.
It is pretty rude. However, fighter's not really my class. So, like, as cool as this is, it is just champion light. So if you're looking to just hit stuff and you want to do that really well, this class is super good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just not my cup of tea, personally.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then the last one, which in my opinion is kind of the one that I'm the least happy about, is the School of Invention, which is for the wizards. So all the wizards get their own school types, which kind of augment their abilities. So, like, if you pick the School of Illusion, all of your illusion spells are better in some way. And this one, this one's hard because its core two of its core mechanics are Tools of the Inventor and the Arcano-Mechanical Armor, which is a mouthful. Basically, this wizard can augment leather armor into a suit, which basically gives them studded leather, but they also get resistance to force damage.
Whoa.
So, like, that's pretty cool on its own, but then they never really go into that any further. Like, that's kind of it for the ability. Like, it doesn't get augmented later in any way. The meat of the class is what they're calling reckless casting, which, if you're familiar with the Sorcerer Wild table, it feels very similar or akin to that.
Okay.
Basically, when you cast a spell, instead of just casting the spell, you can instead roll on the reckless casting table for cantrips and cast the resulting spell. So you can just basically go, haha, I'm going to cast a spell. And then you roll a d10, and 1 through 9 are a bunch of different cantrips, like Chill Touch, and Firebolt, and Light, and Poison Spray. And this is kind of where the luck kind of comes in. If you roll a 10, you get to roll twice and cast each cantrip. But if you roll another 10, you cast nothing, wasting your action. So there's kind of this high risk, high reward, like, oh, I can cast 2 spells at the same time. But if I accidentally roll that 10 again, I waste my turn.
That's crazy.
Also, there's another ability here. Expend a spell slot and roll twice on the reckless casting table for its level or... Oh, okay. I get it. So basically there's a cantrip section, and then there's like first level all the way up to 5th level spells, which work the same way. And it kind of gets cooler as you get up there, because like a 5th level spell, like you could potentially cast Cloud Kill twice.
Whoa.
Yeah, and like Mass Cure Wounds and Hold Monster and Flame Strike. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that's put there. And then the other abilities, you can... Oh, okay, so this kind of helps with the armor. Basically, it allows your armor to augment the spells. A first level... Like, if you expend more spell slots, so like, if you expend a first level slot and then an additional first level, you can manipulate the spell's energy to change the way... or change its damage type. So very similar to, if people are familiar with Unearthed Arcana, this is kind of paying respect to the lore wizard, which was really broken because it could change all of its spell damage to whatever it wanted. Granted, this one doesn't have force or poison damage on the list of damage you can switch to, so it got nerfed, thankfully, to basically elemental damage. But yeah, so this class, it's so weird because its core kit is this reckless casting.
Yeah, that's what it sounds
But
like to me.
but then you also have this filler mechanical armor that allows you to do other stuff. And to me, it seems like they were trying to make they were trying to make another wild sorcerer in another tree. So like a wild wizard, which is cool. I like that concept, and I love the reckless casting. I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to see them remove that armor for something else.
Yeah, I feel
Something that fits more to the randomness or the high risk, high reward situation.
yeah, I would agree with that. It just seems like it just seems like kind of like a weird thing. But I never intend to play a wizard, so
well, and then I like the arcano-mechanical armor, but as its own class. Like, I would love to play an Iron Man character
mm-hmm.
who, during their level up, they basically get to augment this armor to, like, do other stuff. Like, oh, you can, if you spend a long rest, you can give it the ability to water breathe, or, give it so that you can breathe underwater. Or maybe eventually, like, at 16th level or something, it can fly.
Mm-hmm.
Or, give it some, like, super shots, which kind of are, like, scaling cantrips or something. Like, these feel like two separate classes that got merged together, and I think both are cool. I would love to see both of these kind of mechanics, but just done in two different classes. Like, I would see the almost Iron Man to be a subclass of the Artificer.
Yeah, that would make sense to me.
And then for School of Invention, like, School of Invention fits. I almost wish they would move that title over to a subclass in Artificer and then put Reckless Casting into, like, I don't know, the School of Reckless Casting or something. But, yeah. Like, cool stuff, but I think put together they kind of go against each other in ways. Because, like, to me, I don't know what it is, but when I'm like, I'm going to build a suit of armor, I don't think of, like, I'm also going to strap dynamite to it in case I need it to blow myself up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Reckless Casting, I feel like I'd be like that mad wizard who's like, maybe it's a heal. Maybe it's fire bolts. But that's not the case here. Yeah. I got two of these things trying to be one. So personally, I could live without the School of Invention, but I would love to see these mechanics in two separate classes.
Sure. Yeah, it does feel like any of these are super appealing to me, but hey, that's why there's lots of different fairs out there. Also,
for sure.
Can I do a weird little aside?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's D&D, or it's Wizards of the Coast related.
Yeah.
So there's this band that I am now blanking on the name of. But they were the opening band when I went to go see Ailstorm, which is a pirate metal band. And I think their name is Glory Hawk.
Nice.
Something like that. And my friend pointed out that they were playing a show, like a set, like just them in Cleveland, so we went to go see them. We found out afterwards that they're sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, and apparently Wizards of the Coast has a band sponsorship program.
Damn, that's awesome.
So, like, what this means is the dude had a Wizard of the Coast belt buckle, and I'm pretty sure if I understood him right, every time there was, like, a new Magic card expansion, he got a free deck.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my weird little aside. Cool. I don't know what made me think about it, but yeah, Wizards of the Coast has like a fucking arts patronage program.
That's super cool. I like that. I love Wizards of the Coast.
So if you're a band out there and you like D&D, hit up Wizards of the Coast. They might help. Alright, and now nice. Onto our brief little last section, because I kind of want to keep this brief.
Yeah.
Some superhero media. So I'm a glutton for punishment, and I decided to watch Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Ask me anything.
So, why the additional Dawn of Justice? Is there something justice related?
So, in the third act,
okay,
so the last bit of the movie, Doomsday shows up, and then Wonder Woman shows up, and so you have the Trinity on screen for the first time, and like they are always the three that start the Justice League, like always, and like I guess every continuity. And so, and if I'm wrong, don't at me, but that's was my understanding. Also, there was this amazing shot in the last part where they're all fighting Doomsday, and it's all from Batman's POV, and you watch like Superman like ground pound into him, and you see like the fucking like shockwave effect, and then you see like Wonder Woman like hit him with her sword, and then it's just Batman standing there because it's like, honestly, what's Batman gonna do against Doomsday? But yeah, you know what I found it to be more than anything else was just boring.
Oof, that's not good for a movie that's, from what I understand, just an action flick with no meat to it.
Well, I think the thing is, it was trying to have lots of meat. It was just bad meat.
Ooh.
Because it's like, so
isn't this the movie? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Ask your question.
So, isn't this the movie where the reason Batman and Superman kind of like stop fighting each other is because Batman, or I can't remember who said it, but I heard this from somebody that like they talk about Bruce talks about his mom, and it just so happens that they have like the same name or some shit, and they're like, "Nah, we good now."
Yep, that's exactly what happens. Superman is about to get killed by Batman because he has like a kryptonite spear.
Nice.
Sure. And
I mean, kryptonite anything is kind of cool, but you know.
And yes, Superman's just laying there. He's like, "You gotta save Martha." Batman's like, "Why'd you say their name?" And then he was like, "My mom's name is Martha." And then like you get a flashback to like Bruce's parents dying. He was like, "My name was Martha. My mom's name was Martha too." And they like shake hands, and then like they fight Lex Luthor. And then Lex Luthor summons Doomsday, which is like General Zod's body combined with his blood.
Ooh, that's no good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's no bueno.
It's just like both of them appear on screen in costume a very small amount of time.
Yeah.
And it's like the Batman stuff's kind of cool because it's like a lot of it is like the first time he's on screen is actually was kind of effective, where it's like two cops who like get a call and they're on the beat, and they get a call and they go into this like place where they find this like chamber full of like women that are being traded as sex slaves, and then they go upstairs and they see this guy chained up, and like, you know, it's very dark, and the guy's like flashing around with like, he's like pointing around with like a flashlight, and he has a gun, and like he turns and it's like Batman like perched up in the corner, and then he pans away, and then he pans back real quick, and then you see Batman jump out, and it's like, it was like, it felt really cool just because it was like, you know, it was kind of an effective reveal. And then there was another scene where like Lex is like watching like footage of LexCorp, and everything kind of glitches out real quick, and then you see Batman just drop down, pick up a guy, and then drop up like within a half second, and that was pretty neat.
Nice.
Because it's like, I don't think we ever saw something quite like that in any of the Nolan movies, but yeah, I don't know, man. It was just like, there was lots of conversation about like the gods come from above, or devils come from above, and then like it was a lot of Lex Luthor like kind of subtly harassing Holly Hunter, who's playing a senator who's not going to prosecute Superman. And then a bomb goes off, and then everyone blames it on Superman, so Superman gets angry and like pieces out for a little bit, and then Lex...
Wait, why did they blame it on Superman? He's not a bomb man. He's like, he flies and has super strength.
So he shows up... Okay. I need to explain all the aspects of this because it's fascinating how bad it is. So there's this guy, and he's in a wheelchair, and he lost his legs during the end of Man of Steel.
Okay.
And he climbs up onto this statue of Superman with a can of spray paint that says false, and he spray paints false god onto it.
Oh.
And so he gets arrested, and he gets sprung by Lex, who gives him like a fancy new like motorized wheelchair. And then this guy approaches Holly Hunter. He's like, "I want to confront Superman personally. Can I be at the Superman trial?" And she's like, "Okay." And so he shows up at the Superman trial. Keep in mind, he wrote on it false god. He wrote on Superman's statue false god. And then it blows up, and then they're like, "We went to his apartment and we found all kinds of bomb making stuff, and there were also lots of dangling Supermen from the ceiling, so we think Superman might have been his accomplice." And I was like,
Oh.
you mean the guy
Oh,
who
okay.
actively hated Superman for like the entire run of this movie? And they were like, yes. And I was like, whoa, movie's talking to me. That didn't actually happen. Um,
That's oh god, that
yeah.
nah man, that ain't
And like Superman
uh,
just looks miserable every time he's Superman, which is like
sure.
not how Superman should look. Like Superman needs to be like happy about being Superman. I don't know, man.
Yeah,
It was
I
just
didn't see. I didn't see it. I just I listened to a lot of people talk about their gripes with the movie,
yeah.
and I'm just really I'm kind of happy that I didn't waste 2 hours on it.
It was well. Apparently I was watching the director's cut, which people claim makes it better. In my like, okay, it made it about an hour longer. It was about 3 hours. So that's
Ugh,
3 hours of my life I'm never gonna get back.
gross.
Yeah, it was exciting. Ugh. And yeah, man, it was just yeah.
That's rough. I mean,
You know, oh, good.
well, what I was gonna say is like I saw Wonder Woman,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed Wonder Woman, and like part of that made me want to go and watch it, and maybe I just picked the wrong people to hear about it, but like I don't know, like after I heard like their conflict was settled with, oh, our parents are named Martha, like really, like that's what settles the Batman versus Superman debacle.
Mm-hmm. And like
Like,
that's approximately 10 minutes of the movie.
ugh.
Like their big fight. It's about 10 minutes of the movie. So
Oh, so not a lot of action.
the title is like a lie. Well, and yeah, that's the thing, right? Is like okay, so like there's that 10 minutes of them fighting, and then
Right.
in the beginning there's like a couple of there's like I think there's like 3 sequences of Superman and like 3 sequences of Batman like doing superhero-y stuff. And then
Huh.
like the last half hour is them fighting like basically the cave troll from Fellowship of the Rings, because that's what Doomsday looked like. And then everything else was like them meeting each other out of costume, and like there's this whole sequence where like Batman like hacks into Lex Luthor's computer, and Lex Luthor has this file called MetaHumans, and he clicks on it, and there's the Wonder Woman logo, and there's the Flash logo, and there's the Aquaman logo, and there's the Cyborg logo,
Okay.
because he found like footage of these guys doing things, I guess. And
Right.
like man, and
Was that just a little fan service for Justice League?
well yeah, and I think it was like set up it was supposed to be like set up for Justice League too. And like I remember reading a review of the movie that was like that sequence didn't play as fun little fan servicey moments. It served more as a threat, because it's like these movies are coming, right? And I was like, oh snap. But yeah, man. And like so I recently rewatched the Nolan Batman trilogy,
Okay.
and this will be my last point, and then I'll let you do a little bit of talking if you'd like. And so, like, what's everyone's big takeaway about the Nolan Batman movies?
Batman movies. Joker was amazing.
Joker was amazing, but it was like dark, gritty realism, and then
Right. Right.
that Green Lantern movie comes out and it tanks. And so
Oh
Warner
yeah.
Brothers' takeaway is we don't want to have jokes. But
Oh yeah.
if you watch the Nolan Batman trilogy, it's pretty funny. Like he has some really effective comedy moments. It's just like dry and like more like witty humor than like goofy, quippy like you know
Right. Right.
humor. And so like like a
Well.
couple of scenes that would like I'll point out is like in the Dark Knight when he's going to reveal that he's Batman, and Alfred's like, "You're not going to indict me in this, sir," and he's like, "Oh no, Alfred, I'm going to tell him it was all your idea."
Yeah, I
That's a
remember
funny
that.
line. In the third one, like there's that scene where he goes out to get his car, and it's like your wife took your car, and he goes, "My wife." Then it's a smash cut to Anne Hathaway driving. Like that was pretty funny. And then there was a
Yeah.
moment in Batman Begins that was pretty funny too, and I'm blanking on it now. And so it's like it's not that Nolan's movies weren't funny, or it's not that they were
He.
excessively dark. It's just that he took the material seriously, and what everyone took away from it was, oh, dark is that secret flavor that we need,
Right. Right.
not like. But it's like he was dark while also having humor and being kind of funny, as opposed to Snyder, where he was just like dark and like self-righteous and like self-serving and thought he was way smarter than he actually was. Ooh, no offense.
Oof.
No offense there.
Oh.
But like,
Oof. Gonna take him to the burn unit.
yeah, I'm sorry, Zack Snyder, but yeah, like, man, I think he thought that script was so smart, and it just kind of, oh, he didn't even write the damn thing.
He just directed it?
I'm sure he put his own touches on it, because I think he's the kind of guy
Sure.
who, like, puts a little bit of English on it, but yeah, no, man, it was just, like, it makes me appreciate those Marvel movies so much more, because it's, like, they're fun, and they do some pretty effective stuff, but they're, like, fun at the end of the day, and that's what you want superhero movies to be. You want them to be fun.
Right.
So anyway, what do you want to talk about?
I mean, I'm going to be brief. We're kind of cutting over time.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I had way more to say about
you're
that
good.
movie than I thought.
No, you're good. So, there's this Netflix series that I just finished. It's called Travelers. It's on Netflix. It's super good. I don't want to spoil too much, which is why this is going to be kind of short. But basically, the premise of the story is that in the future, shit gets real bad.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to fix that or to change the situation, basically humanity has these what they're called travelers, and they travel. They send their consciousnesses back in time to the 21st century to basically stop like global catastrophes and all sorts of like crazy shit. But they have to take on the persona of the body that they take.
Okay.
So there's this really cool, like, kind of undercover situation, but it's got a really nice sci-fi spin to it. It's super good. There's 2 seasons of it. If you haven't watched it, it's definitely worth a watch. All the characters are super cool. I without getting too much into it, I feel like there's some pretty good depth in the characters. Like, they're not just like, oh, I am this person. Here's the thing that I like. This is the thing that I'm good at. I'm done. Like, all the characters have some pretty cool. Like, one of the characters jumps into the body of a junkie, and the future didn't know that he was a junkie because all their information is based off of like Facebook and like Google searches and stuff like that. So, like, if anyone had a kind of almost like fake life on Facebook, like, they were just like, all right, they're a model citizen, we're going to jump you into them. And so one of the characters basically finds out very early on that, like, oh shit, I'm a heroin addict and I need to like cut this stuff, but like it sucks.
Oh,
so
man.
And that's one of the, I think, 6 main characters. Yeah. That's it's really
cool.
good, and I don't want to spoil too much because I feel like a lot of the show is in like the details and like the things that they talk about and like what happens. But they just ended season 2 on the biggest fucking cliffhanger on the planet. So like now I'm like, oh, I just want to watch more, but I can't.
That's a shame.
But yeah, my fiance and I burned through the 2nd season in like 2 days.
All right.
It's pretty good though. Definitely worth looking at. I'm also excited I'm skeptical. Oh God, I can talk. Skeptically optimistic about the other Netflix show, and I believe it's Altered Carbon.
Okay.
That's coming out. I don't know when it's coming out exactly, but basically it looks like a cyberpunk action series where it follows this really like amazing detective, but it's got this kind of, it's kind of got that almost Shadowrunner vibe where like all the rich people are in these like really nice like super mansions and super buildings, and then like the rest of society is kind of in, kind of the shithole that Earth has become after all this nonsense. So it's got some cool vibes. I saw some stuff. I'm a little skeptical because some of the conversations were a little meh.
Okay.
Like just, and maybe it was just kind of they were trying to get that real gritty thing on, so like it felt a little forced. But I'm super excited because if this does well, maybe I can get more of my cyberpunk TV shows in my life.
Yeah, that's always fun.
So that's it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can call this a successful podcast.
Sure thing. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. But yeah. So thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Yes, thanks again.
We're gonna keep this last section brief because I need to run. But thanks so much for listening. Follow us at all the things we talked about in the middle. And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.